Welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Chris Magra. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Tennesseans and War. It's our mission to research, preserve, and share the stories of Tennesseans who have been involved in wars. And we're privileged today to have Tim Vane with us. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to talk a little bit about Tim and his life and his military service. So can you start with the bona fides and establish how long you have lived in Tennessee?
We moved to Tennessee shortly after my retirement from the Army in January of 1998.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is the longest I've lived anywhere.
Wow. Go Vols. So, where were you born?
I was born in New York City, New York, in the borough of Queens.
And what year were you born?
1955.
And can you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in New York City in the 50s?
I have no recollection of the city since we moved to southwestern Connecticut, a town called Stamford, when I was 4 or 5. Okay. My recollections in childhood really stem from that period.
Okay, so grew up in Connecticut
Grew up in Connecticut.
And that was around 59, 60 when you moved there. What was like growing up in Connecticut in the 60s?
Well, it was great. It was the height of the baby boom. Mm-hmm. So I can remember my mother when I was a child, opening the door at 7 o'clock in the morning and escorting my 3 brothers and I out the door, mm-hmm. telling us to be back for lunch, repeating the process in the afternoon, and then we came back for dinner. So there was always a gang of kids to hang around with and do things and try things, experiment with, learn about interpersonal relationships, get in trouble, get out of trouble, all of those kinds of things little kids do. And because everybody in my neighborhood had anywhere between 2 and 8 children, the neighborhood was very forgiving of children and what they did. So if you were thirsty on a summer day, you'd go to somebody's house, turn the spigot on their garden hose, drink out of that. We were always careful to turn it off, mm-hmm. and just go about our business. So it was kind of almost like a idyllic childhood.
Mm-hmm. And 3 brothers.
3 brothers.
Any sisters?
No, just the 4 of us.
Okay.
All right. The 4 of us.
Just the 4. I'm sure your mom thought, I only have 4 boys.
But the great thing about that town, it was very supportive of youth sports and youth activities. Mm-hmm. So there were little leagues, Pop Warner leagues, basketball leagues, all those kinds of things to do. So between school and after school activities, it was impossible to get in trouble because you had homework and you were too tired. So
did you play sports growing up?
Oh yeah, we all did. Mm-hmm. Primarily football and baseball. Mm-hmm. So there was always something to do, and with brothers it was always competitive. So whatever you did on the athletic field, you always wanted to make sure you were better at it than your brother was, and then of course to go home and tell him that you were better at it than he was, which case that would generally end up into an altercation of some kind, but that was the whole point of it anyway.
I'm the older brother, so I was always better.
Right.
Now, did you have any family members in the military? Father, grandfather, uncles?
The only one I'm familiar with was my grandfather was in World War I, mm-hmm. and I believe he was in the 27th Infantry Division, which was a New York infantry division. Mm-hmm. At the time, I think he was an ambulance driver.
Okay. And did you grow up with any stories of your grandfather?
No, my grandfather died when I was pretty young. He died when I was 6 or 7, and I had. If he told the story, I didn't recollect it, and it didn't resonate with me anyway. As a matter of fact, I remember years later, I was surprised when my father told me he was even in the Army. Right. But he was in it just for World War I, and then he came back home. So when did you decide or start to think about the military? In the mid-'60s, it was the centennial of the American Civil War. And I remember reading a book called Heroes in Blue and Gray. And it was a hardback book, but what really got me intrigued was in gruesome detail. They have these cannon explosions and a rebel and a Confederate rifle to rifle over a parapet or a berm, and explosions going off in the air, and rifles pointed at each other, and one guy getting shot in the face, and guys bloody all over the place. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
You were a teenage boy. You're
no, I was
stuff?
10.
Yeah.
I was 10
Yeah.
when all of that happened, and I just thought, wow, that's really intriguing. Why are those guys doing that?
Yeah.
He says. And then he opens the book and starts to read it and learn about Stonewall Jackson and Meade and Lee and all of these guys who that book claims were heroes. Upon subsequent study, perhaps not the case, but I just thought I got interested in it then.
Yeah.
And then I moved from that at 11 or 12 or 13 to books by Bruce Catton. And he was such a great writer that I had a hard time putting it down, which is kind of an unusual for a 12-year-old to be immersed in these books. But I did. I just thought his writing was creative, it was narrative, it wasn't a history, it was a story. And the story told about all these guys and what they went through. And as a matter of fact, there's an illustration of it at the American Heritage. Yeah. That's one of my favorite books, and especially since the pictures they had of the battles were so descriptive with that little guys, dead and all that other kind of stuff. And so that book in particular that you have right there was one of the reasons that.
Which one is it, Tim? Which one?
See right where the cavalry is laying right next to it. That book right there. And it had pictures of what the battlefields look like today, pictures of back then, illustrations from noted artists who were there. And I was just fascinated by that whole book. And so you get to pictures like that, you see the little guys dead and, all the smoke going off and all the rest of it. Now you got to remember, to 11, 12, 13-year-old, that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So through your teenage years, you're continuing to read U.S. military history?
Read it, watched movies, did all of that kind of stuff, and then was peripherally aware that this thing called Vietnam was going on. Because I remember going to grammar school. People call it elementary school, but in the Northeast they call it grammar school. And I just remember listening to, and the body count this week in Vietnam was. And I thought, trying to it's kind of like the stuff I've been reading about. But I was also a product of, John Wayne movies and heroic this and all that other kind of stuff, which spoke to me about this concept of nationhood and civic responsibilities and all those kinds of things that you say, why do people fight for and stuff like this? And those movies, I think, in looking back on it, were pretty good civic reinforcers of, if you remember the old series Why We Fight. I mean, those movies were kind of like, narrative and commercial branches of Why We Fight. And it kind of really struck with me why all of this was going on at the same time.
So you took that interest and that passion for U.S. military history, you combined it with news of what was going on in Vietnam, and when did you then make the decision to join the military?
Well, it was after that, because I knew I was going to go to college, right? And I also, my parents, there wasn't any question that you were going to college, just which one, right? So it wasn't like as soon as I graduated from high school, I was going to go in. Besides, when I graduated, I was 17 anyway. Back in the Northeast back then, the calendar year was the year for qualifying for school. So I was born in December, which means I was a really late kid in my class. I mean, kids who were born in January were a year older than I was in the same class. So I wasn't going because of that, and my parents weren't going to sign anything for me to do that. But when I got to college...
College in Connecticut?
No, I went to a small Catholic college in Philadelphia. Back then it was LaSalle College, now it's LaSalle University. If people have heard of it, it's because it won the 1954 NCAA basketball national championship. lost in 1955 to the University of San Francisco, which featured two players you may have heard of, Bill Russell and Casey Jones.
Yeah.
By the way, when I look back, the final score wasn't that close.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why you may have heard of it. So when I went there and I
Why Philadelphia and why LaSalle? Just because it was Catholic and you were Catholic?
had nothing to do with it. It had to be. I didn't want to stay in Connecticut.
Yeah. Okay.
I just didn't want to, and I wanted to go to a big city.
Yeah.
And all three of my brothers went to school in Connecticut. So my three brothers trended one way, and I guess in kind of a way you could say I was the black sheep, because I went this way, they went that way.
Yeah.
And that meant political leanings too. I went right, they went left.
Yeah.
So I just decided I wanted to try something in a city, get exposure to all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to go to a school that had ROTC.
Okay.
And I knew myself that I didn't have the vision, or as I might regrettably say on tape, I didn't really quite have the capacity to fly airplanes, right? And I had too much respect for the water. So being in the North Atlantic at night in February was something that I had no desire to do whatsoever. So that eliminates the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
I was left with the Army.
Yes.
And I don't mean to say that was where I naturally inclined towards the Army anyway, because of Bruce Catton, and I was familiar with concepts that they were using. And they had an Army ROTC, and interestingly enough, it was one of the only two schools in the country at the time whose focus was on field artillery. So it was a field artillery branch school, which meant the graduates of it would generally tend to be pushed into the field artillery. Not exclusively, but mostly. Yeah. So I went down that path, and at the end of my first year in ROTC, I was encouraged to compete for a full scholarship, which means tuition, books, and fees. But it also means you're going into the Army at the end. I remember bringing my paperwork in to my father for him to sign, and he looks at me and he says, you don't have to do this. Mm-hmm. I mean, my father was...
What year was this?
This was 1973-74. Mm-hmm. And my father's career kind of flourished at that point in time, so money wasn't really an issue. And that's what he was trying to tell me. And I said, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because I want to. It just has the additional benefit of not costing you anything. So that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Now, this was
do you think your dad was also worried about, you being deployed overseas?
Oh, I'm sure what parent wouldn't be?
Sure.
And this was still just at the back end of Vietnam. We weren't sending any more big troop units over there, but we still had troops there, because that ended in like 73, and then the war itself ended in 75. So it was still in that kind of cuspy area. Yeah. And it was actually kind of a break for me career-wise, because the Army at that point in time was scrambling to find people. I mean, the Army's reputation wasn't in that high regard at that point.
Yeah, the Vietnam War is pretty controversial here at home.
And in my home too. Yeah. I mean, I can remember my oldest brother saying, "I'm not going. If my draft number gets called, I'm not going to be here." Mm-hmm. Fortunately for him, the cut was 180, and he was like 352 or something like that. So he literally made the cut. Yeah. So I mean, there was that tension in the house, and the whole time I was thinking, why? You're a citizen of this country. The country's at war. The country needs people to fight the war. Why are you any different than anybody else? In my, at that point in time, I guess, 14-year-old brain. Yeah. And that thought never left. I thought inherent in being a citizen was the responsibility of responding to the nation's need. Somebody's got to do it, right? So, why are you any different than some farmer from Kansas or some kid from inner city Compton? The point is, You're all citizens. We are all citizens. At some point in time, we are called to serve, right? I mean, that was my life, and I never lost that.
Yeah. What did your mom think?
My mother was a great supporter of her children. She said to me, if you want to do this, if you really think you have to do this, then go do it. So
you did.
Yeah, and so I did. And I bet you she held her breath for the next 25 years. But
so you signed that scholarship, committed to military service, and you went through 4 years of ROTC at LaSalle.
Right.
And your final year, did they give you a list, your top 5?
Yeah, everybody got a wish list.
Did you put artillery down?
I did, because I didn't have a choice. In the sense that I was the distinguished honor graduate of my class. Now, just so everybody knows that my class, it wasn't that high a bar to cross. So remember, this was Vietnam, and it was a small school and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And I don't mean that in any disrespect to my classmates. It's just that I think it's safe to say I put more into it than anybody else did. And as a result of being the honor graduate and being number 1 in my class with all the asterisks you could put next to that,
you felt like I needed to do this.
That was where I was going. And I didn't mind. I mean, because I wanted to be in a combat arms branch. And so tanks and infantry didn't really appeal to me all that much, but that did. I mean, it was, it was precise, it was specific, you could really do a lot of good, you were involved in the planning and execution, and so it just was a good fit for me.
And so what happened next after you graduated?
Well, 3 days after I graduated, I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I went through the Field Artillery Cannon Basic Officer class.
This is what year, Tim?
1977.
1977.
So I go through that. I was commissioned on May 17th, 1977. So you go through that. That's about 6 months, because there's a follow-on course to it. So then I arrived in the Federal Republic of Germany, because remember it was split then, and I reported for duty as in the 2nd Battalion, 27th Field Artillery, which was part of the 3rd Brigade of the 3rd Armored Division, stationed in a little town called Friedberg, Germany, which was just slightly north of Frankfurt. So we were in the 5th Corps area of Germany. 5th Corps was the north part, 7th Corps was the south part. So we had the Fulda Gap in the area from the inter-German border all the way back through Frankfurt and the Rhine River.
Now you're 21, 22?
21.
And not married?
Not married.
And what did your brothers and your parents think about you being deployed over to Germany?
I'm not sure my younger brother and my immediate older brother thought very much about it at all, and my oldest brother thought I suspect thought there was something wrong with me, and because I felt the exact same about him.
Okay.
So my oldest brother and I have always been on either side of the philosophical, still to this day, still nothing much has changed. So. And
your parents, when you were being deployed?
I mean, once they got past that first, hurdle, then it was like, well, they didn't really know how the Army worked, which was okay, because neither did I. And I mean, there's a lot of things ROTC prepares you for, and there are a lot of things they don't. Like that. How do you do that? All right. And that they were notoriously bad at giving a young man. You got to learn that all on your own. Which is frightening and bad, and because here you are, a lieutenant with all the responsibility, and in many cases you're just not ready. You might be ready technically, so can I direct artillery fire? Can I I could do all of those other
training,
things, but it's how to be an officer that's hard, right? And especially at that point in time, the officer corps was, how shall we say, inconsistent. There were some really good ones, and there were some really mediocre ones, and there were some ones who never should have been commissioned. And that all came as a result of the soup that was Vietnam, and who was left and who wasn't and all the rest of it. But the Army in 1977 was like the Wild West, in my view anyway. I mean, it was, some cases, if the Soviets had attacked, I don't know if we would have gotten out of the track park, let alone fought well. I mean, the equipment was old, it was beat up. We were dealing with, in many cases, McNamara's 100,000, you know, towards the end when the war had turned in public opinion. They brought in people who never should have been brought in. Drug addicts, the mentally inferior, shall we say. I mean, there was a lot of waving away of criteria to get people in just to have bodies, because people forget this was still the Cold War, and we still had the big bad Soviet Union to fight, irrespective of what we were doing in Southeast Asia. So mass counted, bodies mattered. You know, there were 300,000+ U.S. Army soldiers alone in Germany, as I recollect, at that point in time. And so consequently, there was an unevenness about officers, non-commissioned officers, equipment, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Not the least of which was, how do you conduct yourself as an officer? You see a lot of bad examples. Remember, when you're 21, you're still a college kid in many ways, and now all of a sudden one day you get commissioned, and now you're supposed to be this paragon of virtue and all the rest of this kind of stuff. Transition, honestly, took me a while. I mean, I would say, if somebody asked me, were you a good officer? I would say yes and no. Technically, yes. As an officer, I left a lot to be desired. I had to learn.
Now, you mentioned the Cold War, Tim. Did that play a factor at all in your military service? Were you thinking about the United States versus the Soviet Union?
Absolutely.
Communism, democracy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah. Because when we used to have these battle books, and we used to drive up to the inner German border and say, this is where you're going to fight from. To many of us, man, this is where you're going to die. Because, I mean, we always looked at ourselves as this gigantic tripwire, right? You know, if the Soviets had really decided they were coming, it would have been horrific. And we didn't think to a man that many of us were going to get back to where we started from. And so you lived it every day. And then episodically, they would have these alerts. So this is kind of like the old World War II movies. You hear the siren go off, and that means somebody somewhere along the line had noticed that the Soviets were beginning to mobilize, and so we had to mobilize and do all that stuff. And most of the time it was just to exercise the system, but every once in a while they'd say, okay, pack up, load out, and move out. Yeah. And that made it really real, except for the fact that at the end of 3 or 4 days, you'd say, okay, they bring it all back, and then you have to turn all that stuff in. But it showed you where the flaws in the system were, which was the whole point of doing it. You know, and equipment breaks, and stuff doesn't show up, and orders don't get transmitted properly, and that's when you say, man, I'm glad this wasn't for real. The only thing we had going for us was to say they're probably just as bad as we are. But that was during that period of time, 77 through 79, and then you think things would happen around the world, like the taking of of our embassy in Tehran. Yeah. Man, I thought, oh, we might have a different job in a different place. And then when we found out the Soviets were putting troops in Cuba in like 80, you know, it was like, there's little tension points that, you know, kind of reminded to you in your sober moments, this isn't a joke anymore. I mean, this is real. This has got, honest to God, real consequences.
So how long were you in Germany?
Well, I was there from 1977 to 1982, which is unusual. Yeah. Because they're typically designed to be 3 years. So you, as a lieutenant in the field artillery, you become a forward observer, a fire direction officer, an executive officer. Your 3 years is up. You go back to the United States. You go back to Fort Sill. You go through your next advanced course, and then you become a staff officer, and then you become a battery commander.
But not you.
What?
But not you.
Not me. And not me was because I tend to be pretty aggressive, and I got pretty good at the forward observer, fire direction officer, executive officer. And at one point in time, because of the vagaries of the personnel system, one of the captain battery commanders was leaving, and there was going to be kind of like a gap. And I, at my 23-year-old self, walked into the battalion commander's office and said, I think I should be your next battery commander of that firing battery, because I didn't want to be in the headquarters battery, the service battery, because that's not where the cannons were. My expertise wasn't in those other, my expertise was in running a field artillery cannon battery. And he looked at me and he said, get out of my office. And I said, well, that's just his first response. You'll get used to the idea. So over time, I warmed down. I would just say, I could fill that problem for you right now. Yeah. And eventually, he did. Yeah. And eventually, the brigade commander, the division artillery commander, had to sign off on it, and he did. Now, this is unusual, because now I'm a first lieutenant, I'm 23 years old, and now I'm in charge of 6 cannons, 6 ammunition carriers, and 100 soldiers, and I'm 23. Yeah. I'm dealing with non-commissioned officers who are 35, 36 years old, that kind of thing. And to me, it wasn't a problem, but in retrospect, I was young, right? I probably was not initially as good a commander for the first 6 or 7 months because I had to learn in a hurry how to not only treat people but lead people that are older than you. Mm-hmm. And so learning how to make a group of people into an organization that can fulfill its mission but hangs together cohesively in other ways mm-hmm. was something that was a learning curve that was straight up. Yeah. But the challenge for me relative to the Army is I have now done things out of sequence. So I just described the sequence to you. So now, instead of being in Germany for 3 years, I've been in Germany for almost 5 years. I've done my command time, which is what the advanced course is supposed to do, and is your graduation exercise before you become a field grade officer, because supposedly you have the maturity now, you've done all those things so you can lead a battery, mm-hmm. and you're 27 or 28 years old as opposed to 23 years old. Right. So at the end of, and by the way, I would say by the end of my time in Bravo Battery, 2nd Battalion, 27, we had become the best battery in the battalion. But like I said, to this day, I still feel bad and apologize to those soldiers that I just didn't have the maturity to deal with, but I learned. Mm-hmm. And so now I come back, or I'm getting ready to come back, and again I say to myself, well, why should I go to the field artillery advanced course where they're going to teach me to do what I just did? So what, I can do it again? Well, that's probably not going to happen. You get one shot at it at that point in time. Yeah. And you have one shot, 18 months to be a battery commander, right? So I said, let me try something different. Let me try to go to the armor advanced course, because at that point in time, in that first assignment, we supported an armor battalion. So as a 2nd lieutenant, we ended up joining a company that supported a battalion, and we had to use the vehicles we had because we didn't have a dedicated fire support, a fire support forward observer kind of vehicle. So that means you had to use what they had, which was a tank. So, and by the way, if you're on the tank as a lieutenant, you're the commander of the tank. Remember, I went to the Cannon Basic Course. I didn't go to the Armor Basic Course. But I went to the Armor Basic Course in the track park in Germany, and then gunnery sessions. You want to talk about being more aggressive than you are aware. So I say, sure, I can be a tank commander. Why not? How hard could it be, right? Some questions you don't really want to ask and answer. Yeah. So I found out. So we go through gunnery, and we passed all the gunnery course. So I can show you, if we were doing this at my house, my certificate I still have from the 3rd Battalion, 32nd Armor. I am a qualified M60A1 tank commander. And as I said to all my armor buddies, you guys went to school for 6 months. I did this 3 weeks in a track park. Not that hard. They didn't have that reaction.
So this is 1982, 1983?
No, this was the armor part was 77, 78 in through there. And then, yeah. But so now at the end of this, while I'm trying to figure out where to go, the armor, when I talked to my branch guy, as I recollect, the guy who was my assignment officer, he said, "No, that's all full, but we got infantry." So I said, "Okay, I've been to Fort Benning. I'm a paratrooper. I've been through Fort Benning." So I went to the infantry officer advanced course
in 1982,
1982.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, it was fine. I mean, it wasn't overly. I shouldn't say that because that's being disrespectful. It was just that because of my experience in understanding maneuver stuff, it wasn't like this big cultural difference, and so it was an academic environment. You weren't out there leading troops and that kind of stuff. But I mean, I did all that kind of stuff, and so I thought to myself, and the reason I did it was because, well, I now can't say to the Army, I've been there and I've done that, and now the artillery stuff, and now I've done this maneuver stuff. So I could be a really good, fire support officer in an mechanized infantry division and an armored division, and they said, "Sorry, you can't do that." I said, "Why not? Credentials are all there." And they said, "Yeah, but you've done things out of sequence." And what I got from that was, "And now you shall be punished." Right? Now, in the Army at that point in time anyway, there are some guys who could get out of the sequence and use that and maneuver their way to much more attractive assignments, greater responsibility, but more important, greater visibility. Yeah. Because if the one thing that you'll ever notice about who general officers are, there's almost always one trait they all have. They've been an aide to a general, right? And so they get to peer behind the veil. They get to look into the inner sanctum. They get to see how, and they get noticed, and they get known. And so that's how they kind of fleet up. Other guys find other assignments, and just because they're able to, sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors, and move into assignments. It wasn't my case.
Are you thinking, Tim, of your career path here, or are you just thinking, this is a cool assignment?
No, I was thinking career path, because field artillery, as a field artilleryman, you are always a support guy. Maybe when you get to be a division commander, a field artilleryman could be a division commander. That's a 2-star. So you're always going to be in fire support, right? But I figured the more I could make myself knowledgeable and aware by different kinds of organizations, armor, the more I would be an attractive asset to put in those other kinds of positions, and therefore be in a place where ultimately, I don't think I ever thought I was going to be a division commander, but I'd be useful. Maybe I could become a division artillery commander at some point in time. Mm-hmm. So, but the Army said, "We have different plans for you, son." Mm-hmm. And it was the dreaded 3 R's: recruiting, readiness region, and ROTC. Mm-hmm. Now, fine organizations, absolutely necessary, but they were radioactive. Why were they radioactive? Because they took you out of the mainstream for a long period of time. ROTC is 4 years. That's what they wanted to do, one complete cycle. Readiness region was 3 years. Work with the National Guard and reserves and all that other kind of stuff. And then recruiting was 2 years. So I figured I could stand on my head for 2 years until I got there. Oh God, that was so hard.
Where did you do?
I was in
what Army recruiting office were you?
I was in Houston, Texas. I was the company commander of the Houston West Recruiting Company. It was joyless. It was soulless. It was just really hard. Because think of it, what you're asked to do. You are asked to go to some kid, 18 years old, or his or her parents, and ask them to give up X portion of their life in exchange for training, education, whatever it happens to be. But ultimately, you're going to be a product of the Army, and the Army is going to send you where they want you to do, and in the course of doing that, you may be maimed or killed. We didn't really try to promote that part too much. It was the training and the education and all the rest of it. Now remember where Houston, Texas is, right? In the middle of the oil patch.
Yeah, sure.
And when times were good in the oil patch, it was hard for recruiting.
Yeah.
When times were hard for the oil patch, it was good for recruiting, especially all the kids from Michigan and Indiana and Ohio who came down and get oil patch jobs. So I made it through. Did I thrive? I guess I thrived in the sense that I didn't get relieved. I didn't get fired. But I mean, and the other problem is you have this mission per month. And this mission per month, you're a hero for the amount of time you've made mission to the next recruiting month begins, which is often 8 hours, right? So there's like no break ever. And the pressure is always there to produce. But the mission you are assigned, how many bodies you must put into the Army, doesn't vary once the month begin or once the quarterly assessment is done. And when you had recruiters, I had in one period of time, one recruiter get killed in a motorcycle accident, one recruiter who had a heart attack, and one recruiter who was brought up on charges for cheating and lying.
And you still have your quota.
And I still have my quota.
Yeah.
And then,
what rank are you at this point?
I'm a captain at this point. And so at the quarterly adjudications where you sit in front of a full colonel who is the recruiting region commander, and then you have your boss sitting there, and I had to explain this.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, I had to explain it. And it's like, and this isn't, and not only that, you're in front of all your contemporaries too. And you see my retreating chart, and it goes like that. And I got up there and I said, sir, there's nothing pretty about this. I mean, there's just nothing. Yeah. And I said, I had this, and I had this, and I had this, and a variety of other things. And I said, it just all happened at one point in time. So the question isn't that, it's what I'm going to do about it. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he just threw up his hands and said, good luck, kid, or that's the worst story I've ever heard, or whatever. Yeah. But, and he did, on my efficiency report, he must have understood it that way, because he didn't take it out on me as being grossly incompetent and all the rest of it. But what I learned from that is, if something's bad, don't lie. You can't sugarcoat it. I mean, the chart is the chart. The graph is the graph. Those numbers have meaning. Everybody understands what they mean. So the issue is, what do you do about it?
Yeah.
So I'm just about to see my way through to that, and I meet this woman.
Okay, in Houston. Yeah.
And so things go along. We decide to get married. The question then becomes is, how do we make two households one? All of the things that every couple has to figure out how to do. And so as we're going through that process, it becomes crystal clear that I can't go someplace else, and because we're going to get married in Houston. So I extended for another year to make it a 3-year assignment, and I become the operations officer, which means now what was really interesting, was kind of fun, because at that point in time the recruiting command had really done a lot of statistical analysis, computer work, and all the rest of this kind of stuff. So you could figure things pretty tightly based upon a variety of inputs about what recruiting company should get what mission, and all that kind of stuff, and who cheated. And you could really see all that. So it was one of those kinds of things where I would go into negotiations with the new recruiting company commanders and say, here are your numbers. And they'd say, I said, don't start. Just don't even start. Those numbers aren't negotiable. At least with me anyway. Now you may be able to talk to the battalion commander about it, but I can prove to you without a shadow of a doubt why you got that number. If you want to take me on, let's go. Well, that happened, I think, one time, and I never had a problem with that because the data was so good. So that part was kind of fun. So halfway, as my year is up, and I am now concerned about, okay, now I'm going to go back to become a fire support officer. And I get a letter from the Army that says, congratulations, you've been selected for our advanced civil schooling program. To which I called my assignment guy and say, what does this mean? I never heard of this before. They said, well, the Army has certain specialties that they don't develop their own schools for, and so what they want you to do is go to a university to get a master's degree in something, and then we'll utilize you to go do that in another capacity later on. And I said, well, what about all this fire support stuff I wanted to do? He said, sorry, pal, that's not happening. You're out of sequence. And we don't know what to do with you, in essence, until you become a major. So you can forget all that. So, remember, that's opposite of the way I was trying to do things. So I went and looked at the list, and they have all of these functional area specialties, they call them, and one of them was like maintenance operations and nuclear engineering, and I thought, well, okay, boy, got anything else on this site? And it said public affairs, and I said, public affairs? What's that? And they said, well, this is where you interact with the public. And I came from a showbiz family. My father was in television. My brothers were movie producers and television writers. So I mean, whether I had a talent or not in it is debatable, but I had a familiarity with it. So I thought to myself, well, let me go do that. So they said, okay, now you have to go get a school. So now I got to go take the LSAT, no, not LSATs, the graduate, that thing, and all that other kind of stuff.
This was like 1986.
This is 85.
Okay.
84. And it's like, okay, sure. And then I said to the Army, well, what do you suggest? And they, Texas and South Carolina and Marshall and Cal State University Northridge. I said, really?
Do you know I taught there?
Really?
Yeah, I was there for 4 years.
Earthquake U, huh?
Go Matadors.
Really, that's funny, because I said Northridge, California. Well, it just happened to me, my entire family lived in the greater Los Angeles area. And it just happened to be that we learned of the imminent arrival of our first child. So I thought to myself, if I go to any place other than Cal State University Northridge, that supportive mother I had would be less supportive. So at that, the reason I went there was because we have a baby there and have that infrastructure.
And you got your master's in what?
I'm sorry?
You got your master's degree?
Yeah,
Cal State.
I got a master's Master of Arts in Mass Communication.
Okay. Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that is you couldn't get the master's without the underlying journalism degree. So when I went full-time to the school, in essence, I got an undergraduate degree in journalism during the day, while I did all the master's stuff at night. Sandwiches around the baby, and
it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I know what you're going through. So, well, not really, but so it was a lot to go through all that. Interestingly enough, I found the undergraduate stuff far more useful when I got into the Army to do all that stuff than the theory of mass communication and all that other. I mean, let's face it, some of graduate work is I'm not really sure why it's included, but
We're not either.
yeah. But so I finished that, and the interesting thing about that is
1987.
this was 85 to 87 because the Army says you got to be done in 18 months.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
You got to be done.
Yep, that's right.
And sometimes graduate schools don't see it quite that way,
Yeah.
except at
Were they sending you to West Point then?
No. I'm getting to that.
Okay. Yeah.
So at Cal State Northridge, they were all for it because here's why. Another Army officer had preceded me a year and a half before.
Yeah.
It helped their statistics.
Sure.
Because we got out in 18 months. Meanwhile, people in graduate school were taking 4 and 5 years to get done because they were commuters.
And the Army pays for it too, Tim.
And the Army pays for it. And it's cash.
Yeah.
And it's they don't have to worry about once the bureaucracy works. That check is coming every month.
Our grad program loves to get military personnel.
Yeah. No. And actually, for a bunch of people who I thought were going to be rather doctrinaire and left of center, they were, but they were fair. I mean, they would listen to me. One guy, even when the whole thing going on with Nicaragua and Ortega and all that stuff, he had a map of Nicaragua up on his office. He said, I don't want to talk about that stuff. Tell me, how will you invade Nicaragua? I don't know. You have a clearance? I don't know. They haven't told me, okay?
So if you didn't go to West Point, where did you go, Tim?
Well, there is a need on the Army, across the Army, for public relations officers.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand it when I was going into it, but so I go from there to the Defense Information School at Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana. And from there I go to, remember, because the Army puts you through a school, even though I just come through school,
Yeah.
this was the military's way of doing public affairs, public relations. So I then am assigned to 3 Corps and Fort Hood, at Fort Hood, Texas, as the
Back in Texas.
as the media relations officer for 3 Corps and Fort Hood.
Is your wife glad that you're back in Texas?
I don't. She was indifferent.
Okay.
Yeah, she was indifferent.
She was from Texas? Had
No,
family
she's
in
from New
Texas?
Hampshire. I'm from
You just
Connecticut.
met her in
We just
Houston.
met her in Houston.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So, but it was the first time she'd ever really been on an Army installation. And that took some getting used to for her. But my role was to interact with the media. Now, here's where I learned a lot of things, that a lot of military installations are really large with a lot of soldiers and a lot of stuff. There are very few people who are designated, designed to deal with outside organizations, and this office was one of them. And the 3 primary pillars of any public affairs office, not public relations, public affairs, is community relations, internal relations, and media relations. And so those 3 distinct things. So you want to keep the troops informed, you want to keep the community informed, and you have to deal with the public. And I used to get questions from soldiers all the time saying, well, why do you even exist? I said, for 2 reasons. The first reason is we have an obligation to the Republic to deal responsibly with them, because we take a gigantic amount of public money to run this thing, and we control the most precious asset the country has to offer, which is the public's children, right? Right? The second thing is, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of you guys aren't going to do it. And at that point in time, the contempt for the media was astronomical on the part of officers, particularly senior officers, who still felt like the media was one of the reasons why Vietnam ended up the way it did. They couldn't tell the truth about what happened. And in many ways, they're right. I mean, remember the old Colonel Harry Summers, who was a strategist, said he had a conversation with the Vietnamese general when he said to him, you know, you never beat us on the battlefield. And the Vietnamese general said, that's true, but it's irrelevant. And it's right. We never lost. Even, as everybody thought, the great offensive, what was that called? The Tet Offensive?
Yeah.
They got decimated. The Vietnamese regulars and the NVA got decimated. They didn't fight aggressively for another 2 years because we beat them so badly. But the American public never knew that.
Was that in your mind when you are in Texas and doing
I thought about stuff like that because I'm the one because the only tool I had was my credibility. And if I didn't know the truth, then I couldn't be credible. And in order to know the truth, I had to interact with them. And I had to listen to this, let them get it out of their system because nobody had ever asked about it before. Yeah. And then say, okay, now, comma.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was always, and that's always, and by the way, the reverse was also true. The media always thought everything out of your mouth was a lie. You were trying to cover up something. You're not going to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
So the only guy stuck in the middle is the public affairs who can see both sides, but has a hard time bridging the gap across to the other side.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it was just, and nobody else.
Did you enjoy that challenge? Did that family background kind of come to the fore?
I enjoyed that. I did because I think over time, in working with people on the military side, they came to trust me. Yeah. That I wasn't taking their side, but that our side had to be explained to them, and I can't do it. And sometimes that may mean you talk to them. I'm not talking to those. Okay, I get it, but
somebody has to do it.
Now, and this came to play later on. I mean, and if I remember to tell me, remember when you said, but so this is in 1987, and so life goes on there, and
just one child at this point.
The second one makes his appearance soon.
Okay.
So. It's military installations are big cities, and people don't realize that. I mean, Fort Hood, at the time, maybe still is the largest military installation in the free world in terms of combat power. There were 2 divisions there, an aviation brigade, an artillery. I mean, there was just 45,000 soldiers and 2 miles of tanks and artillery pieces and all the rest of it. But you also have soldiers, you have families, you have schools, you have this, you have that, you have the other thing. So there's always something going on. There's always a murder, there's always larceny, there's a fire. I mean, all that kind of stuff that the media relations part. I mean, it got to the point where my kids would say, "Hey, Dad, you're on TV again." I got sick of seeing myself on TV. That was what my job would be the interview. God, I'm on TV again. What do you think? You did all right, Dad. Well, thanks. I got the approval of a 7-year-old.
Always tough to get.
Yeah, no, that is true. But episodically, we would, because the specialty is in high demand all over the world, and especially when things happen. And so consequently, I was deployed more as a public affairs officer than I was as a field artillery. I mean, you've just gone frequently.
Yeah.
And during this period of time, I was
1987 to
this was
1989.
Okay. 1889. Where I got deployed to Panama.
Okay.
Now it was a 6-month rotation, but another guy and I split it, so he had the first 3 months, I had the second 3 months.
Family back home in
Family's
Texas,
home, but I report to the headquarters in Panama.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with Noriega, right? So, and I'm down there when he's harassing Americans, and then finally George Bush had enough. Yeah. The funny thing is, the too bad part is that the Public Affairs Office wasn't notified of the invasion until the day before. Now that thing had to have been planned for weeks and months, and for whatever reason, the leadership down there of Southern Command decided not to let their public relations people know what was going to happen, as if this was going to be unnoticed by the world.
Right.
Right? And
do you think they thought you would leak it?
I have no idea what they thought, except the commanding general was Max Thurman. People used to call him Mad Max Thurman. He was a 4-star general, confirmed bachelor. All he did was eat, sleep, breathe Army, was the commander of the recruiting command for a period of time. But he was a very, very smart man, but he was driven. And if you weren't in with Max, and I just think they just decided not to tell public affairs what was going to happen. Now I don't know what they thought was going to happen after that, but we got told the night before, and you can say I remember our public affairs officer for Southern Command was an Air Force officer named Colonel Ron Sconyers, and I don't know what was going through his head after he came back of it, because we were unprepared. I mean, what are you supposed to do? The world is going to be here, if not tomorrow, then soon thereafter. There's going to be a lot of media. How are you going to handle that? And I'm watching this with, my eyes wide open, because I can handle the media, but they didn't know what the plan was. They didn't have any idea what was about to take place. And then I get a special assignment. I don't even know if I can...
As if that wasn't special enough.
No, but an assignment within the assignment.
Right.
And it was like, it had to do with politics. Right? So I'm told it was classified. I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but I'll just leave that part out of it. So the invasion goes on. I'm off doing my thing. There's explosions going off and things are on fire and all the rest of it. And I don't mean to imply I'm in the middle of it. I mean, you can just, the atmospherics of it. And lo and behold, we win. 3 or 4 days later, it's pretty evident the Panamanian Defense Force, if it exists anymore, is in hiding. And it's funny, of the combat theaters I've been telling, the only time I got shot at was there. Where I was actually in a conversation with General Thurman, which meant I was listening, he was talking. And 50 to 75 yards away, an errant PDF mortar round lands, and it was just kind of like, that's kind of interesting, And back to the conversation.
And that was the closest. That was all the different places that you had been, things that you did. So that whole process winds through. Was your wife worried about you?
Well, I couldn't talk to her.
Okay.
It's funny too, because
for the entire 6 months, or just that window?
Just for that window. I mean, all this stuff happens, and now she doesn't hear from me, and it's like.
Right.
But it was funny too, because I remember talking to Sconyers the night when he tells us all this, and because I was supposed to leave the next day. My 6 months was up the next day.
To go back to Texas. Wow.
And I remember when he was done briefing, he says, anybody have any questions? And I said, yes, sir, it's me. I'm not going back tomorrow. I was trying to lighten the mood in the room, and I think Sconyers appreciated it when he just no. All right. So finally, I don't know, that was December 20th, 21st, something like that. So finally, a couple weeks later, I was able to go. But what was interesting was learning about the media in a way that I had never seen them like this. This was like, piranha on a calf leg.
Descended on.
I mean, just all that descended on there, and I want to know this, and I want to know that, and it's like, 86 of you, one of me, wait, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I got to do was, as the media would come into the Air Force base that was open under media pressure, the Joint Chiefs weren't, I mean, we'd won, but there were still pockets of resistance and all that other kind of stuff. And so I got to be the escort officer and doing the media relations officer on a bus that would take the media from the airport to the headquarters where the Joint Information Bureau was. And I remember sitting behind a New York Times reporter and a Washington Post reporter who obviously knew each other. And on the way in, as we crossed the Bridge of the Americas, they could see something burning in the distance, and they said, "I bet you that's the Commandancia on fire. That's probably, the main headquarters. It's probably burning." And I tapped one of them on the shoulders and said, "You guys ever been to Panama City before?" "No." "Well, how in the hell do you know what you're talking about? Yeah. You don't. That could be anything burning, a warehouse, a wharf." And that kind of got me, is like some of these people who are Pulitzer Prize winning reporters, I scratch my head sometimes and try to figure out why. Because I got to see a lot of these guys up close and personal, and it was kind of like, are you sure you're really, because I don't know where you're getting this from. Yeah. And again, that was where a lot of this stuff was in tension. But this was the first iteration of the DoD media pool. And if you don't know what the DoD media pool was, it was formed after the invasion of Grenada, when the Navy admiral, because it was an island, and as a result of Vietnam, said, "I'm not letting any reporters on the island." You know why? Because I can. And the media got incensed over that, quite correctly. But this was, in my view, payback. Yeah. Right? We're in control. And we're not letting you see anything at all.
And the DoD then established.
And the DoD then said the media pool, which was, there's the rules at the time, as I recollect, was the media has a group of people that are on 24-hour standby, and they're supposed to have a bag packed and ready to go, and then we ship them and they take off. That didn't happen in Panama. 48 hours later, maybe 60 hours later, the media pool shows up, and it's led by Fred Francis, who was an NBC television reporter. And I never saw a guy angrier when he met Colonel Sconyers, and he ripped him a new backside. I mean, up one, "How dare you do this? You're not prepared for this." And I just think Sconyers saying, "Fred, if you only knew." But he couldn't. Yeah. He couldn't say that. Yeah. And so consequently, we had to, it was all an ad hoc operation. Where do we put them? How do we take care of them? All that other kind of stuff. Again, because DoD didn't do Sconyers any favors. Yeah. And when we get to my discussion about Haiti, 15 years later, that hadn't changed. Too many times, operational headquarters, people in the Pentagon and all that other stuff do not understand practically how hard it is to do what they allow to have happen, because they don't have to do it. Yeah. And I'll get to that when we get to that. So I come back home and continue to work. We actually ended up working with Hollywood, because after Top Gun came out, the Army wanted to do the similar thing with the new Apache helicopter, and it was a movie called Firebirds, and it starred Nicolas Cage and Tommy Lee Jones, and it went absolutely nowhere. But I got to deal with that, and that was kind of interesting to see Hollywood in action again. Yeah.
You're at Fort Hood.
Yeah.
Back to Fort Hood, and how long do you stay there before you move?
Well, while all this is going, I got a letter that says, "Congratulations, you've now been accepted to the Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas." So in 1990, I go to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for a year. And then when I'm at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas at the Command and General Staff College, it's time for your assignment.
What rank are you at this point?
I'm a major at this point in time. I got promoted just before going to Panama. Okay. So I'm a major. And at this point in time...
1990-ish?
What?
1990-ish?
1990-ish.
Yeah.
is when I go to August of 1990.
Okay.
It's August of 19. Trying to remember the date. I have to look at my duty too. No, I think it was 1990 because 90. Yeah. So it was 1990, and we go to Leavenworth. And what happens while we're in process in Leavenworth? Saddam invades Saudi Arabia. All right. So we're all these majors, senior captains. No, hell with this. You know, we want. It's like, boys,
sit down with your books.
Sit down with your books. Now, to their credit, you know, they had stuff on TV come in all day long. And I even had a guy in my class who became something of a friend, who ended up becoming a 4-star general, who just said to the instructor, "I'm sorry, I didn't do my homework last night. I was watching this all night long. You want to give me an F for the day, fine, but I just couldn't not watch this." And he said, forget it, I watched it too. Mm-hmm. So this was all going on the backdrop, which was kind of an interesting learning environment, because, you know, here you are going through all of this and then watching it. And of course, then 90 rolls into 91. And in February, you know, off we go. And what's it, 25 hours, whatever it was, it's all over. So now in 91, before you leave, you got to negotiate what your next assignment is. So now here we are, what is it, almost 10 years later, where I get back into the Army.
Okay.
You know, I mean, with like a meaningful field artillery job, because they have now beaten me back into okay, now you're even with everybody.
Yeah.
And then I sit down with the assignments guy, and he said, "Well, you know, we would like you to be the what's that term? The not the adjutant general, but, you know, where people listen to you all the time and they come and complain to you and all the time about, what is that term of art? The assignment."
Where people complain to you all the time?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's really what you are. I mean, really, and that's all it is. Something general, the not advocate general, but inspector, IG. That's it, an inspector general. And then we want you to be an inspector general, and we want you to do it in Europe, or we want you to do. And I said, wait a minute. If you go back through my record, you guys just exiled me for 10 years. I want to go back to the field artillery. By your own admission, I have to go back to the field artillery. You put me in an inspector general job doesn't do that. Now, what do you got? right.
Yeah.
And he's shuffled paperwork. Oh yeah, okay. I got this thing in the regimental fire support officer for the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. I said, I'll take it. I said, don't you want to know about it? Nope. That's what I want, because the longer I give you to look around, somebody else is going to take it, and all. That's just fine. So that job is, you are the senior artilleryman in a brigade. An armored cavalry regiment is a brigade. It's organized slightly differently, and it is focused purely on combat. I mean, that's what it does. And it was located in Fulda, Germany, at the famous Fulda Gap, except the Fulda Gap's not there anymore.
So you're back in Germany.
So I'm back in Germany. Yeah. But while we're negotiating all of this...
I meant to ask you, Tim, did you like Germany? And you spent quite a bit of time.
Oh, I had a great time. I had a marvelous
time. Good people, good...
Yeah, it was wonderful.
There.
You didn't have to speak English, you know. Everybody learned a little bit of German, and when you go to a hotel or something like that, you'd start and you're broken pigeon German, and the guy would say, "This would just go faster if we speak English. Thanks for the effort. Now, what do you want?" I tried. I really tried. But it was great. I mean, the time I had off as a bachelor, I traveled. I mean, I went to the races at Monte Carlo. I went to Trier. I mean, I was skiing in the Swiss Alps. I mean, you know. Boys got to let off a little steam. Yeah. And so we did all of those kinds of things. So I'm back, but it's different.
You're back in 92, 93?
Go back in late 91.
Okay.
91, 93. Yeah, right, 91 and 93. But while I'm talking to my sponsor about it, he says, one thing you got to know, when you get here, we're not going to be here. I said, where are you guys going? We're going to Kuwait. I said, why? We won. He said, yeah, but everybody else is leaving, so we're going. Now, remember, the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment sat on the inter-German border for close to 50 years, right? The border, the fence, all that kind of stuff. So now we were going to go to Kuwait to guard the Kuwait-Iraq border, because that point in time would have covered the year anniversary of Saddam's invasion. And remember, Saddam was still in power, and so the United States just wanted to remind Saddam that we still have a presence, we're still here, don't do anything stupid. And so while everybody else left, we came in, which gave rise to the joke that we're the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, and we don't care where our border is, we'll guard it. So that's where we went. But the interesting thing about going there was, I met my commanding officer and all that stuff.
So you went from Germany to the Iraq border?
I dropped my kids off at my sponsor's house.
Yeah.
And within 2 days, I was in Kuwait.
Wow. What did your wife think about that?
She was not happy about that.
Yeah.
Two little kids, new place, new country. We didn't have a car, nothing.
Pinballed around from place.
That's why I have nothing but the profoundest respect for my wife, because she doesn't need to have her hand held. She just says, give me the mission. If you're not going to be here, that's fine. We'll survive, And she did. Remarkable. No complaints, no bitches, no nothing. So I go off, and there I am in Kuwait. And I meet my commanding officer, and we do all this artillery stuff and then all this stuff. But the thing about Kuwait, which is really interesting, and I haven't really seen much about it, is when everybody else left, you still have the remains of the war. Minefields are hidden, sand is blown over them, roads, to the degree they exist, are gone. You have trucks with ammunition that had been blown up by the Air Force that, not all the contents were completely exploded. You find mortar rounds and artillery rounds that are cut in half with the explosive showing exposed to the sun. You have a lot of this ammunition that the Iraqis had buried to more or less a degree, that in the desert at 130 or 135 would cook off and just explode. So every day, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there'd just be these random explosions all over the place. You'd see clamshells from cluster munitions, it was just dangerous.
And what are you doing there, Tim? Are you still a major at this point?
No, I'm a major, and I am now the chief artilleryman. I'm the regimental fire support officer in charge of all field artillery operations, planning, execution for this cavalry regiment. Yeah. So I'm the senior artillery guy. So if there's an artillery question, the commander's going to look at me and say, no, I've had 10 years off, right?
Yeah. Did it all come back to you?
No. No, it did not. Okay. It did not. I had to do a lot of tap dancing to say, yes, sir, there's some issues I need to check before I give you an answer, and I'd go back and figure out, talk to people. Fortunately, I had a section of mine that was my little support group in the office, a guy who had just been a previous battery commander, and he's waiting to go back, and so he was really knowledgeable, and he really understood the regiment, and he was a really great source of information. And he played it straight. He didn't lead me down the path. So I got a lot of respect for him for helping me until I could get on my feet.
Now, did the media person ever come to you and talk to you, and did you get a chance to tell them to take a flying leap?
No, we were there. There was nobody. Oh God, Chris, we were like, we were out in the desert the whole time. And that was when Garmin's first came out. One of the reasons why we won the war is because we had GPS and the Iraqis didn't. And there were sections of the desert the Iraqis never used to go to. They used to get lost.
Yeah.
And so consequently, we'd be, churning through the desert, blowing, and they had no idea we were even there. They didn't even think it was possible.
Yeah.
So having to learn GPS and all the rest of it. But I'd say, one of the things about life in the desert is, especially that desert, there are no terrain feature. Everything looks like everything else. And it's 135 degrees during the day, and it's 85 degrees at night and clear, and you freeze your ass off at night. It's 85 degrees. Yeah, it's also a 50-degree temperature differential between the day and the night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really harsh environment, and I have never been in a physical environment that wanted to kill you more than the desert. Anybody who disrespects the desert deserves what they're going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a harsh environment.
How long were you there?
See, I got there in July, and we came back in September, so 6, 7, 8 weeks, something like that. And and the interesting thing too is you can't drink, Muslim country. I came back in great shape. I mean, really, it's like, and then when you go there, the food's not all that great, so it's it's so hot, and it's just kind of like, man, I like.
So then you went back to Germany?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we, 6, 7, and then we go back to Germany. And it's a transitional period now because it's 1992. Soviet Union is gone. The Chinese haven't emerged. We've kicked the crap out of the and there's nobody left to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, at this stage, this is the era of the peace dividend.
Yeah.
We have beaten everybody. The United States sits astride the world like a colossus. Nobody can screw with us. And of course, what do? What we always do. We immediately begin to cut ourselves. It was horrible to watch it all.
Yeah.
I mean, we had this magnificent instrument created, to go back to the beginning, from Vietnam to what we did in Iraq, that air-land battle sequence. And we, at that point in time, we were really good. We could do anything we wanted, anywhere we wanted, to anybody we needed to. And the best part was they knew it. So, peace reigns.
Now you're almost 40 at this point. You've got a wife and two
I am
kids.
not. Don't push it. Don't push it. At this point in time, getting ahead of yourself.
You're closer to 40 than you are 30.
Getting ahead of yourself here. I'm in my mid-30s to be sure. Let's not put numbers on it.
Well, but my point was, are you still thinking long-term military career?
And
or are you thinking it's time to?
Oh no! At this point, I'm past 10, so I'm going to 20. If that's what your point is. If your other point is, do I think I'm ever going to become a division artillery commander? At this stage,
I don't know what you're thinking, Tim.
Well, neither do I, because apparently I'm old and I'm senile. But
or at least in your mid-30s.
Yeah,
I mean, either one.
I'm in my dotage at this stage, right? No, I mean, at this point I'm thinking, if I do a good job on this assignment, then, maybe my field artillery career is resurrected and I can be competitive again. Because, I've hit all the gates and I've done a lot of things that should be positive differentiators. It shows the whole man concept. I can go to graduate school. I can be, all that other kind of stuff. I'm thinking, if I do well here, it should be okay. And I did well there. I mean, we did a lot. I had 2 different commanders, one of whom became a 4-star general. Yeah. Well, General Wallace, who actually led the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And I did everything. I did everything well in that assignment. But during that period of time, which is why I brought up the peace dividend, you could look at the United States Army Europe phone book from 1990, and there would be something like, 35 to 45 field artillery battalions that would ultimately need a commander. So I'm a major, next rank is lieutenant colonel. If I do well here, now I'm competitive to become a battalion commander of a field artillery battalion, which then makes you eligible, because you got to go through those gates in order to get to the next one. Yeah. And then all the time in the media, it kept, and in Stars and Stripes, this unit's gone, that unit's gone, that unit's gone. And so you look at it and you get to the point where it's like, there's like 15 artillery battalions available when there used to be 40. The need's just not there anymore. Yeah. It's just not. Yeah. And so that's when I said to myself, I'm not competitive. I'm just not going to be competitive because I haven't been an aide to a general. I haven't surfaced on all those staffs. I'm not known as an artilleryman by Department of the Army. It's probably not going to happen. And then I got a letter in the mail that says, this seemed to happen with alarming frequency over the course of my career. It said, congratulations, you've been selected for the Army's Training with Industry program. And much like the Army's Advanced Civil Schooling program, I don't remember applying for it. Yeah. How come I got selected to do it if I didn't apply for it? Well, the Army moves in mysterious ways, and they apparently have pretty good personnel files. Mm-hmm. And they said, I got this call, and they said, how would you like to be how would you like to go train with industry? And I said, great. What does that mean? It was just kind of like the same with the ACS story. This is, the Army has special requirements that require. I was like, okay, what does that mean? Well, we want you to either do the following. We want you to go to a public relations firm and learn all the techniques they use and then bring that back to the Army, or go work with CNN and learn how to do that stuff and then go back to the Army. Yeah. So what they're talking about is PR versus broadcast is what they're talking
about. Now, Tim, this circles me back to my question about you being in your mid-30s. Okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You've done all this various stuff. You've had an unorthodox military career.
You're being charitable.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And the military presents you with yet another possible career path. Do you think to yourself, another challenge, I'm going to do it? Or do you think this is enough? Enough is enough of changing me, molding me, shaping me in different ways. I just went out of this thing.
No, I never thought that. I never thought that because
you enjoyed all the new challenges.
Well, all the challenge. I mean, they really were. I mean, my career is different than most. Yeah. And I do enjoy the different challenges. It would be nice for the kids and all that because the time I've been with the 11th Armored Cavalry, I haven't been there. Yeah. I mean, and they used to send us on command post exercises, and they brought reforgers back. I mean, there was a time between Labor Day and Thanksgiving where I was home for one day. I mean, we were out in the field the entire time, or command post exercises or something. So I thought, this would be an interesting. Besides, if I don't do that, what else? I'm now a major in the field. They're going to do something that they're offering me a bone here. And the point is, sometimes with these bones, you put enough of the bones together, and it's a pretty interesting career over a while where the Army might say, hey, we don't know exactly what the hell you did, but we might find this interesting or usable or functional somehow. Yeah. And I thought, I was kind of building towards that. So I thought to myself,
PR and industry.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so now, prior to receiving that, I had been contacted by the public relations folks versus the assignment folks, and I don't think it was the same group that said, well, when you're done, because we had gotten, speaking of which, we had gotten notification that the 11th ACR was going to be inactivated, and this is in 1993. And I got to use my PR skills to do media interviews and set up a little newspaper and all that other kind of stuff, informing everybody that the flag's going to get furled after 50 years of continuous, blah, blah, blah. And it was really sad. I mean, it was really sad that happened. But I kind of got it. It's like, well, it seems only right. I mean, all these artillery battalions went away. Why not an armored cavalry regiment? And so while all this was going on, they said, well, we're going to have you switch from your field artillery hat to your PR hat, and we want to send you to Vicenza, Italy for another year and a half.
I did not see that coming.
So that you could, we can keep you here in Europe, and I go back and and tell my wife.
Why Vincenzo, Italy?
Funny, that woman I lived with had the exact same question.
Yeah.
And so I said, sure, I mean, that sounds like fine. And my sponsor showed up, and they had a villa for us, and it was all ready to move in, and then this happens.
Yeah.
And I talked to the assignment people, and they say, well, you go to Vincenza, that's not really all that challenging assignment. You go to this, you're training with industry, you are now considered a world-class public affairs officer within the Army. That doesn't show up in your file or anything. It's just that it's one of those discriminators. It's a positive discriminator. So I know instinctively what the right career move is to do. But then there's this other thing.
In the villa?
There's this other thing that you have to work through.
Yeah.
That was.
So you did. You went to Italy?
No.
Okay.
No, that was not a pleasant conversation to have with my wife. She just, well, if we're not going to go to Italy, where we're going to go?
Yeah.
I said, all right, baby, this is the good part.
Yeah.
We're going to go to Pittsburgh.
Now, I've lived in Pittsburgh. It's not Italy. It can't even be described as the Riviera of Pennsylvania.
Turns out you're right.
But there are rivers.
They're actually live. There's not three. There's only two. They say it's Three River Stadium, but I'm sorry. Two becomes one. But never mind. That's subtraction. That's not addition. But in any event,
so you go to Pittsburgh.
So I say to my wife
for the PR with industry.
And I go to Ketchum Public Relations. It's 6 PPG Place right downtown.
Yeah.
So we moved to an area called Upper St. Clair, which is right on the T line, and we rent a house, and I go do that. Now, remember, Vincenza, Italy, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We got that planted, right?
Yeah.
So, on Halloween night, it snows 8 inches on Halloween night.
Yeah.
Taking the kids around in a snowstorm was really actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, the last time it snows is Easter Sunday. According to native Pittsburghers, it was the 3rd worst winter on record. I would go downtown, get off the T-stop, walk the 2 blocks from the T-stop to the building with all that wind at the middle down there, all that wind channeled through those buildings. Yeah. I was crying by I got to the office because that wind would just pound you in the head the whole time.
Yeah. Lake effect snow. It's a thing.
Lake effect wind.
Lake effect
channel.
Wind. Yeah.
So the point is that even at that point, I said to myself, you could have been in Vincenza, Italy.
Yeah.
You could have been.
You chose this.
And I said to myself at that point, the entire time here, I cannot complain to my wife about the weather because she's going to say,
yeah, you picked this.
You got it.
So how long were you in Pittsburgh?
Well, I was supposed to be there. The way the rotation ended up, I had to leave 2 months early. And the reason I had to leave 2 months early, and this is where all of this fangled stuff comes together. Because I have been selected to become the 18th Airborne Corps and Fort Bragg's Public Affairs Officer.
94, 95?
94. Because Pittsburgh was 93, 94. So I guess we got there in like August, and I had to leave in April. And I should have left in May. And the reason is because they're planning the invasion of Haiti. And the reason they picked me was because the guy who was the current public affairs officer, a full colonel, is older, and every time he'd gone on a jump, he'd gotten hurt. And I think at that point in time, they were trying to ease him out and bring him in. Now, I hadn't had a parachute jump since 1976, and this is 1994.
I wasn't going to bring up
I know you can't. So now we're at the point where you can bring it up. At this point in time, I'm 38 years old. The last time I had
Can we say you're close to 40 at this point?
Yeah, now you can, because it's past 35. But at this point in time, I haven't jumped since the was at the end of the Ford administration.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so, and one of the things you're supposed to do is go through this jump refresher training and all the rest of that. And they don't send you back. I mean, you got like a 3-hour class.
Yeah.
Okay, you've been trained. And I'm sitting there, and for some reason, there's this private there who's 17, maybe 18 years old, and we happen to be sitting together, and he said, he looks at me and he said, "Hey, sir, when was your last jump?" I said, "How old are you?" He said, 18. I said, "The last time I jumped, you weren't even born."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Well, God, you're old, sir." And I said, "Private, go away." and he was right.
Had you been promoted at this point?
I'm a lieutenant colonel now.
Okay.
So when I was at the public relations place, I got promoted. So I'm now a lieutenant colonel. Lieutenant colonel, like no time in grade. And so now I'm on the 18th Airborne Corps staff. Do you know what that's like? This is the United States Army Imperial 18th Airborne Corps in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. This is with, the guys with Ridgeway and all those kind of that thing. This place is a no-nonsense, bring your A game, bring it every day, and never show any weakness.
How did they feel about PR?
And this is high threat, high vis. They hated it. Of course they did it.
Yeah.
It's like a PR guy is,
Yeah.
and the part, when you think about it in terms of performance and all the rest of it, the guy who I followed was this old guy, got hurt on every jump. That's the kind of place you can't show any weakness, right? And they used to make fun of him. And as a matter of fact, after my first jump, when I got there, some sergeant came down the hallway and he said, "Are you the PAO?" "Yeah." "You jumped last night, right?" "Yeah." "And you're here?" It's like, "Congrats." And he shook my hand. He said, "I never heard of a PAO who didn't get hurt on a jump before." I mean, it was that kind of like, you're kind of like, they said this out loud. You're a weenie. You're a weenie branch. Who gives a crap about public affairs, public relations?
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that, right? So I'm bring the family down, we get all settled and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And so now it keeps moving forward. Now remember why Hades happened.
Are your kids in their teenage years?
No, heaven no. They're little kids.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
grammar school, elementary school.
Okay, so the moves, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, they're fine. I mean, it's all, the great news is, that's all they've ever known.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't care. We're here, we're there, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I got lucky when it came to those kids. They rolled right along with it. So I have 2 boys at this stage. So we're doing all the prep work, right? We're doing all the prep work, which means, and this is just an interesting facet of life that I don't think most people understand. So I go to work all day, but then we have a practice mass tactical parachute jump at night. Because, and by the way, when you do that, what was explained to me was you're going to fly for 4 hours because they're trying to get used to you conditioning your head, because that's how long it takes to get to Haiti, right? So you fly around for 4 hours, you jump at night, get your, that's it. Now sometimes there's an exercise associated with it, sometimes there's not. But when you finally get done with that, then you come back. You drop all your stuff off, weapon, and all that other stuff off, and you're just in time for morning physical training. And then you're expected to stay there the rest of the day too. That's just the deal.
Yeah.
And you can complain about it.
And you're no spring chicken. You're no spring
you keep
chicken.
coming back to
you're
that.
no spring chicken to
but I am in really good shape for an old chicken.
To do all day, all night, and then all day back to back.
That's what the requirement in the 18th Airborne Corps was. You have to jump once every 3 months. You have to do a 12-mile ruck march with all the stuff on in less than 4 hours. You have to qualify with your. This is not okay.
A cushy position.
What?
It's not a cushy position.
No, you got to do.
What does your wife think about you jumping out of airplanes?
She didn't like it.
Yeah.
she wasn't wild about
Yeah.
it. I mean, because every once in a while, I think they did something like, the projection was on any jump, no matter how many people there are in the jump, 1 to 3% of you are going to get hurt.
Sure.
And sometimes die.
Sure.
And I've been on jumps where guys died. You know, it's just luck. It's a roll of the dice. You know, sometimes stuff happens. But the strategic context for Haiti was the island was so badly run. It's so corrupt, so poor that the Haitians were, leaving the island and washing up on the beach. And remember, at that point in time, newly elected President Bill Clinton now had his first foreign policy problem, and diplomacy wasn't cutting it. And remember, Aristide, the elected president, had been moved out by the three thugs that were running it, and so he was in exile in Florida. So I guess the strategic thinking was replace Aristide, bring him back to the island, get rid of the other three guys, and now the reason for all these people leaving goes away. Now remember, this is prior to the midterms, right? 1994. So they're not stopping, and the decision is made to go.
Yeah. And then you, as the PR person, have to be...
Well, but see, the difference between Sconyers and me was I was me and not Sconyers. I learned... Huh?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No.
Check me on that. No, but my point is I learned from that mistake, and because they brought me in early, I was able to work with the core staff to say, you got to do this differently. Because when I got there, the plan was
Was that your thinking, that we didn't want this to be another Panama situation?
Oh, but entirely.
Yeah.
Entirely.
Yeah.
And because I remembered, I read all the after action, what happened with Metcalf, in Grenada. Well, and the island of Hispaniola was the same. Remember, Haiti's part of the Hispaniola. So we could have done the same there. And when I got there and I read the initial plan, it was not much different than Metcalf. And I said, this is not only wrong, it's criminally wrong, and beyond that, it's stupid. And why is it stupid? See my preceding comments. No, but beyond that, I thought to myself, we're not going to lose. We're not going to lose to Haiti. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. So if you go into this with the notion that you cannot lose, then that opens up a whole new area of possibilities, right? And so I said to people, we ought to invite the media, not hold them at arm's length. What we need to do, because we're going to win, is bring them in and show them everything. And then, because a lot of these guys think they're John Wayne, well, we ought to give them the opportunity, mandate, that they go with units as they go in based upon the kind of media that they are. So, for example, certain units had certain equipment and different parameters that lend itself to print, lend itself to radio, lend itself to TV. You had to think of the media as it presents itself. What kind of stories do they need, right? So, in my mind, this is based upon the media pool. We take those dozen or so people, and then we parse them out that way, give them to units, talk to the units about what they can and can't say, and then let the thing unfold in all its complexity, good and bad, so that people can see how tough these things are. This isn't easy. This is a varsity level performance. It has every one of the services involved, and the Coast Guard, which was a Department of Transportation asset at the time, all of it having to work in harmony in order to work. That's not easy. There's going to be mistakes, but if there are mistakes, at least they're published mistakes, and we're not going to be accused of covering it up, right?
And is that how it played out?
Yeah. And when I first told General Shelton, who was the Combined Joint Task Force 180 commander, this plan. He looked at me like I had something growing out of my head. I mean, and you got to understand, General Shelton was 6'5". He had a head that looked like one of those statues of Easter Island, and these big and these black eyes that went right through your soul. Yeah. And he looked and he said, "You better be fucking right." You're right. I better be. Yeah. But then it was my job to explain to the entire Corps staff all of this. Okay. To his credit. To everybody's credit, this was embedding people in the media in units hadn't really been done since World War II, maybe Korea. And if it happened in Vietnam, it was not necessarily the best situation.
Yeah, because Al Gore was, as a journalist, dead in Vietnam. He was.
Oh, yeah.
He did.
Yeah. So I mean, some of that happened, but it was not. It was choppy, right? And it was a battle here, a fight there. It wasn't across the board. And this is an invasion, so the parallels weren't exactly right, but I was pretty confident that we were so good at that point. We could do anything we want and it would work. And so consequently, I had to speak to the entire Corps leadership, which included members of the Navy, Air Force, all the rest of it. And it was like this big amphitheater, and it was like, all right, now we're going to listen to the public affairs plan. And it was a skeptical crowd. Yeah. That's how I say. Yeah. It's a skeptical crowd. Yeah. And I went through all of that. Now, I explained it all to them, and I showed them all that. And what really helped is, at the end, General Shelton said, "This is what we're going to do." Now, I couldn't have done it, but it's like when the boss says, "Okay, you may not like it, I may not like it, but you got to admit what he says makes sense. And so we're going to do it. I expect you all to do it." Now, part of that is when the media pool arrived, guess who met him at the gate?
You?
General Shelton.
Oh.
I convinced him to say, the only way, what's really going to impress them is you tell them the entire plan. Lay it out. Yeah. And he said, classify. I said, don't worry, they're not going anywhere. They're going to go from when you briefed them to their units. They're not going to have a chance to talk to any. Besides, the one thing I would ask you to say to them when they show up is say, with 6'5", big head, but he's an impressive guy. And he's got that North Carolina accent. And he said, before I tell you this, I want you to understand that if any of this leaks prior to this operation taking place, and we find out who does it, I am going to personally vilify you in the media as being untrustworthy, and then having you explain to somebody's parents why their children died because you leaked it. Yeah. That's the going premise. You guys may not say anything until that first paratrooper hits the wind. Got it? To their credit, none of them did. Yeah. Now, after that, we spread them around, and it was one of the most professionally rewarding moments of my life is when a New York Times reporter was sitting in his chair like this with the laptop computer on a map of Port-au-Prince with all of the angles and objectives and all that stuff, and looking over and writing and looking over and writing. And this is the time the 82nd Airborne Division is doing their and nobody is paying him any attention whatsoever. He's not asking anybody any questions. They're just working on their own pieces. And at that point in time, I realized I think we got it right. Mm-hmm. I think we got it right. Mm-hmm. So now that's the 18th Airborne Corps, but I also have to deal with the Atlantic Command, which is between the 18th Airborne Corps, or in this case, the Combined Joint Task Force 180 is what the whole thing was called. And so between us and the Pentagon is Atlantic Command, and so I had a group of people I had to deal with there too. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, when I told them at the beginning, I said, this is fucking stupid, and managed to convince them. But we still had to go up the line. So at one point in time, I was summoned to the Pentagon as the whatever panel on this kind of stuff was convening to talk about the plan.
Summoned from Fort Bragg?
I drive up from Fort Bragg.
Okay.
I leave at 3 o'clock in the morning to get to the Pentagon, and meetings at 10 or 11, something like that.
Had you gone to Haiti at any point during
Not
this?
yet.
You're still in?
This is the prep phase,
gotcha,
so we're still going through the preparation for all of this. This is sandwiched around the all-day jumps, the meet,
Yeah, well, you go to the Pentagon.
Right,
Yeah.
Sure, go to why not?
Yeah.
So, and the meeting is chaired by David Gergen. Remember David Gergen? Political, what?
Vaguely.
Yeah, well, David Gergen was, at the time anyway, this political guy like James Carville. He had served Democratic presidents, he'd served Republican president. He was very well known in the media, and he was an advisor to Clinton. And I don't remember what his role was, but somehow he was in charge of this meeting because he always did the morning shows and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So you had this big panel desk with all the high muckety-mucks around it. And then you had a row of chairs with military officers. And then you had the row of chairs back against the wall. Sometimes they're talking about all this stuff, and then the media plan comes up and they say, who wrote this? And they look right at the Atlantic Command guy, who is my superior, who looks to me. So, and it was at that moment I realized, Chris, this is how it works. This is exactly how it works. Yeah. What they're doing is they're trying to establish a chain of responsibility, and if anything fails, they know who to blame. Right? Yeah. And this is almost like, I told you, remind me about Sconyers. It's the same thing. Okay. At some point in time, Sconyers would have gotten the blame for the failure, and in fact he did, even though nobody told him along the way. So it just seems to me to be my personal observation that everything, that stuff flows downhill, right? And it slows down to the guy who's got to do the work, even though he's not necessarily given any power over it. Yeah. And so the discussion went back and forth, and it was just kind of like, all right. Because they didn't have a better plan. Yeah. That's the idea. It's like, and they realized if it all worked out great, it would have been great for the president. If not, we know who to blame, right? Now that may not be true. David Gergen died recently, I think, so we never asked him. But that was my impression of how life worked in 1994, anyway. Yeah. So off we go, and all of that works to the point where, if you want to, there was actually a book by John Ballard, who was at the Atlantic Command, who talks about the media and it was my plan. He calls it my brainchild, but it's all true about how all of this worked and how it went and all the rest of it. And I can tell you, how I know it was successful? And I can tell you how I know it was successful. First of all, not a single American died during all of this. And what's even more interesting to me in how good the United States military was, they were something like, 85 planes in the air with paratroopers going to jump into Haiti, because I was one of them. I was going to jump in with the first wave on Haiti. And then in the middle, and while we did a great job of operational security, you still can't hide 65 planes leaving Fort Bragg, right? So the triumvirate down there knew we were coming. But if you think about it, and this is some ways competence reveals itself in very small ways. But every one of the radios worked in those planes. Mm-hmm. So every one of the planes got the message to turn around and go back to Fort Bragg, and every one of them did. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine if one plane didn't, and you have 65 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division conquering Haiti? They probably would say, you want us to give it back? It's ours. We won. But the point is, none of that happened. Yeah. That's competence in a very small way, that none of that happened. And by the way, too, competence, we were going to go in We were going to go knock down the door and kill people. Absolutely, we're going to do that. In mid-flight, not only does that happen, but the president expects that U.S. troops will be on the shore the next morning, and they were, because the Navy had brought the 10th Mountain Division down. They got flown in, and the next day it was about as seamless an operation as was humanly possible, and no American got killed. That, to me, is competence. Good planning, good execution, good skill sets all the way along the line. And it all got captured because we had the media everywhere. And the reason I say, you know how I know we did great? Because the New York Times never made a peep about it. The Washington Post never said anything was screw up. What could they possibly say? And not only that, we didn't hide anything because you guys had a front row seat to all of it. Now, we didn't get any praise, but we didn't get slaughtered either. And that's how you know you won. All right? So that was like a wonderful, that was probably the, I guess, the highlight of my career. And kind of like when I look back on it, all those other little different jobs I had kind of all fed into that in some kind of way. But it was just really professionally rewarding. And you know what's funny is, not that I expected a whole lot of pats on the back or any of that other kind of stuff, but when you're successful, nobody cares. I mean, it's like, well, we expected you to do that. But if hey, Gergen, why don't you bring me back up in front of all those guys? But what's really interesting is when we're sitting, because we were on the island for three weeks, and then we got pulled back to the USS Mount Whitney, which was the command and control strip at Port-au-Prince, where General Shelton was. Because after a while, they wanted to move the 18th Airborne Corps not back, but out, and bring the 10th Mountain in and let them do it while we stayed offshore. And I remember meeting with General Shelton and General Akers, who was the chief of staff, and we were talking about this, and I said, well, sir, if you excuse me, I got to start writing your speech for the Rose Guard. And he looked at me and he said, what are you talking about? I said, sir, the president is going to invite you to the Rose Guard, and he's going to give you a medal and all kinds of stuff. He said, using an expletive, what the, I said, think about it this way, sir. You are the new president of the United States, who only won with 43% of the vote, who was accused of pot smoking and philandering and all the rest of it. He doesn't have the trust of a lot of different people in the foreign policy establishment. And he had this crisis in Haiti, which you and Combined Joint Task Force 180 just did flawlessly, gave him everything that he wanted, and nobody died. Don't you think potentially he's going to make some hay out of that? Okay, I said, and who is the personification of all of that? I didn't do all. I said, no, sir, you did not. But you are the commander. And the commander is responsible for everything his unit does or fails to do. This was a textbook assignment on how to do that. And I think you can expect something along those lines. Which he promptly told me to go myself and go back to my office and not bother him anymore. And then we get back to the Atlantic Command headquarters. For some reason they wanted me, they went back on a private jet, and for some reason they wanted me to go, so I went back with them. And so we're all lined up, standing there as the commanding admiral of the Atlantic Command gives him some kind of medal or something like that. And he says to him during that ceremony, well, everybody, I just want you to know that please stay tuned next week when General Shelton gets called to the Rose Garden for a ceremony with the President of the United States. And both General Shelton and General Akers looked down the aisle at me, and I said, just told you, told you, And so, and that all happened, and he did marvelously, and all the rest of it. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. But it was, you're on a knife's edge all the time. And to the other point about working with officers that didn't trust the media and all the rest of it. I was working with a military police brigade commander who had a visceral hatred of all things related to the media. And at one point in time, he said to me, I understand your plan, I get it, but don't you ever bring one of those guys to me. And I said, okay, sir, that's fine. But let's make a deal. For every phone call I get from the wife of one of your troopers who says, why isn't anybody from the 89th Military Police Brigade on television when all of the other units are, I'll send them to you. You can respond to them because I can't. And he looked at me and he uttered an expletive that began with F and he said, all right, and there was another bunch of words, I'll take them. 2 weeks later, he came up to me and he said, I don't know why I fought you on that. That was the smartest thing I ever did. I have those reporters are here, they're great. They have a wonderful rapport with my soldiers. There's just wonderful print stories going back home. And, Vane, you're a lot smarter than you look. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your support, sir. Appreciate that. But that whole thing gave me a lot of credibility on the Corps staff from that point forward, because I'm a lieutenant colonel. They're all colonels and generals. Okay. And because I'm part of the general's personal staff, not part of the operational staff, it's always like, but the thing is that sometimes in the military you tend to live a very insular life, or insulated life. And there were many times from that point after we got back where there would be some event that took place that had an impact in the media that I had to go past colonels and generals in order to get in to see General Shelton, and I'd say, I'm sorry, sir, but this is a hot rocket. This really can't wait. Yeah. And in I'd go. Yeah. And I don't think they liked it. As a matter of fact, I know they didn't like it. But it had to happen. And because General Shelton and General Akers were always very supportive of the function, of the role, that I was able to move with a lot of freedom around the staff. And I was always very conscious of recognizing the other equities that the other staff officers had in it. And always went back to them afterwards to try and explain what happened and what needed to be done. And I wasn't trying to do it, but it just happened. Something you just can't wait, right? A response is needed, and that's got to be coordinated. And what you're working on is certainly more important, but importance is not immediacy, right? And so you have to juggle all that, and
you had the credibility after Haiti to get into those doors, and otherwise you might not have.
Yeah, and that helped. I mean, that Haiti thing really helped. That, and I never got hurt on a job either, but at least that I couldn't walk away from anyway.
Yeah. So you're back at Fort Bragg?
So now we're back at Fort Bragg, and life goes on.
Yeah.
And we have all the other usual things.
Are you promoted after Haiti?
No. No. I mean, that's just. It would be nice if they brought back brevet promotions, but no. I mean, that was just just an item. Oh, by the way, before I forget, there is this. Okay. If you want to read about, and I don't know where you can get that, but that is a lot of the staff officers involved. The Army always does these after-action reviews, and so I'm on page 150. But it talks about various officers and the functions they had as part of the planning, because the Army always looks at who did, how do you get better and how do you do the post-mortem on a certain thing. So that's my little piece of it. I just thought you might find that interesting.
Yeah,
there are other histories around of that.
And so are we...
And by the way, that was 38-year-old me.
Still jumping out of airplanes. What land the plane for us, Tim? Are you still thinking there's going to be more career here? Or are you thinking at this point,
Well, that's
got to think about life after the military?
well. See, so now I'm coming up on 20 years, right? Right.
Yeah.
And now it's when the dice staff side begins to become something that can't be unaddressed. So now I have children who are in 4th grade, 6th grade, and you got to do the planning out, right? Like, it's not just now, it's, what happens in 2 years and 5 years and all the rest of it. And this is about, I'm coming up on the end of my 3rd year at Fort Bragg, and it's time for me to move. So all of these things are taking place in tandem. And so I get a letter. It seems to happen all the time. It's because the Army is the only institution, maybe UT's good at this, I don't know. But whenever you have this decision you got to make, they throw this little sweetener in and said, oh, by the way, would you like to do this?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
Did they hold up a villa in Italy again?
no, it wasn't a villa in Italy. It was, you have passed the selection criteria to be selected for the Army War College. That's the pinnacle of Army education. Now, there's 2 flavors. There's in residence, and then there's by correspondence. PAOs don't get the in residence. I got the correspondence, but it's challenging. But here's the problem. I got to do that on my own time, where these other guys get to go and live there for a year and think deep thoughts and do all that. I have to do it Saturdays, weekends, night, all that other kind of stuff, and fit it in when I can, when I'm doing whatever else I'm doing. And the Army says, it's time for you to come to the Pentagon. And I said to the Army, but I don't want to go to the Pentagon. I've done everything I can to avoid going to the Pentagon. I don't want to serve in the Pentagon. Please don't make me do this.
Why not?
You ever been to Washington?
Yeah.
Remember that Gergen meeting?
Yeah.
It was Gergen meeting time all the time.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it is
high pressure.
It's not just that.
Intense.
It's demanding. Excuse me, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's demanding and soul sucking.
Yeah.
Right? You got to go there. You got to beat the traffic. You got to return from the traffic. But I was going to go to the Army Public Affairs staff.
Yeah.
And I had a simple question for my program manager. I said, what am I going to do? I have just lived a life of an adrenaline junkie at the 18th Airborne Corps for 3 years. All right? I am programmed to do weird stuff.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, look at my.
I'd be tired. I'd be exhausted.
But I'm a young 39 at this point.
A young 39. Yeah. Strong legs, strong back.
Strong leg.
Yeah.
Well, not the back. But I can do a lot of different things. And what are you going to have me do? Well, the general wants to build a strong bench. Yeah, I got that. What am I going to do? Am I going to be a desk guy? Am I going to answer the phone? Am I going to get coffee?
Sounds great to me. I love coffee.
Yeah, well, so do I. But it's like, you just can't say after what I've been through and at this stage of my life, because there's not that many public affairs officer. By definition, there's not many. Yeah. So you can't tell me that you haven't sat down and discussed with the general what the plan is going to be, and if you haven't, I've lost a lot of faith in you and him. Because you would think you would say, that guy Vane is coming, we got to figure out a place to put him and use him, not because he's any great talent, but he's survived. Yeah. If nothing else, I've been through a lot of things and I've survived, right? And I had, I think, a fair number of general officers. I don't remember alienating any general officers. And sometimes that's better. I mean, neutral is better than bad, right? At least that way, if you come to a promotion board or something like that, they can't think of a reason not to sign off on. Yeah. And I was still thinking that way. And then they said, nah, the general wants to have deep staff. And I said, there's another option. She said, what? I said, well, I can go to Forces Command. I could go to Training and Doctrine Command. Let me go to Atlanta. Let me go to Virginia. Nope, he wants you up here. I said, there's a third option, She said, what? I said, I could retire. Yeah. She said, you'd never do that. This keeps going the way it is, it might. I just never understood why personnel officers show no flexibility. They slot you however they do it, for whatever reason they do it. But there's absolutely no flexibility. I wasn't saying that I was going to retire at that point. I was just wanted to see some willingness on their part to be able to say yes or no. I mean, yes, you could do this, you can do that. I didn't want to go back to Europe again because my kids were in 5th grade and 3rd grade. And one of the reasons why I didn't want to go to the Pentagon was I couldn't see a way to get out from that point on. Mm-hmm. I mean, once you get there, and especially in Army Public Affairs. I mean,
you could do that for a long time.
The only place I could go would be to Training and Doctrine Command or Forces Command or maybe some other big level command that had a colonel, but there weren't many of them.
So what did you do? What did you decide?
I decided to get out.
Yeah.
I decided that, at this point in time, if I went there, I wanted to see my children grow up. And if I had gotten to the point where, even if you're not necessarily full occupied with the job at the Pentagon, there's still the time getting there and getting back, which is traffic time, which just means I wouldn't have seen them before I left, and they may have gone to bed after I got back. Mm-hmm. In addition to having to now do all the correspondence work for the Army War College.
Yeah.
I subsequently found out that if everybody was telling me the truth, and I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't, that I was black booked. You know what black booked is?
Put into some position you don't want to be put in.
No, that's black marked, not black booked. Black booked, I think, it is for specialized jobs for people to support other people. For example, remember that tall guy I told you about, Shelton? Found out after I decided to retire that he called back from the Pentagon, and he's now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at this point, looking for me to go work for him. I had heard somebody say that I was being considered to be the personal public affairs officer for the Secretary of the Army, something like that.
Yeah.
But at that point,
your decisions are made.
It was all very interesting, but I at that stage of life, I couldn't get past this other part, that said, at some point in time, and if I had had them earlier in life, I would have been past that threshold. They would have been in high school or college. But the point is, at this stage of the game, they're, 12 and 10 or something like that, whatever it was. And it was just kind of like, and there's one other facet that plays in all of this. I mean,
well, your wife has been through a lot.
Well, she has, probably, but she's good. She would have. She said when we talked about this, she said it's your call. Yeah. I mean, we're used to doing this. We can continue to do this.
Good for you, Mrs. Vane.
Yeah, but it also got to the point too where it's like I'm now 40. The travel log. I'm now 40, and it's like I'm not going to be a soldier anymore. Yes, I'm going to wear a uniform. Yes, I'm going to do all of these things and wear all that stuff, but I'm not going to be a soldier anymore. Sure. The last job I had was the last time I could serve with troop units. I could rub shoulders with that private.
You went out with a bang.
And it was just like, it's just, I'm just going to be a guy in an office and all the rest of that kind of stuff. I'm going to be wearing shiny shoes and polyester pants and all the rest of that. I'm not going to be, and don't get me wrong, that wasn't. I mean, I loved all my time. I have nothing but respect for the Army, but it had to do with how I looked at myself and that kid who was 10. Sure. Who gone through all of that and be able to say, it's not the same. I'm not ever going to serve in a troop unit ever again, and that's not how I think of myself.
Yeah.
I thought of myself as a soldier, and then when you take that away, I might as well be back at Ketchum Public Relations doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided, could I have been a colonel? Probably. Could I have been a general in public affairs? Statistical possibility. There was only 2 of them anyway, 1 star and a 2 star. Did I have a mathematical shot at it? Yeah, especially since no general hated me.
Yeah.
It could have been a possibility. But I just said, for those reasons, it's just like, it doesn't sit right.
So 95, 96?
97.
Okay, 97 you're out lieutenant colonel?
I retired as a lieutenant colonel.
Okay. And then what do you do when you retired?
Well, that's
Just
always...
spend time with family?
I did for a while.
Go to work for a PR firm?
But don't forget, they have a schedule too, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, but I'm in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay.
Right? So, I take my time off and all the rest of it. But then the question now is, fortunately, the general I knew at Fort Bragg, General Akers, knew a general by the name of up in La Follette, General. They had the highway, and Carl Steiner. That's it, General Steiner, who was from La Follette. And he was a 4-star general and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and they were friendly, but Steiner was a very influential man in East Tennessee, and so Steiner said, hey, why don't you go talk to these guys at Oak Ridge, to General Akers, since he retired. They might be able to use a guy like that. And so Akers went there, and remember, this is during the peace dividend, right? Y-12 was looking for a mission. Why do we have nukes if there's nobody to fight, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing, that same kind of thinking. And so they wanted to use a lot of the specialized capabilities there and at the laboratory, because remember, they were Martin Marietta at the time. And so he ended up becoming, in essence, a marketeer for both of those facilities to the defense industry, to the Defense Department. When I told him I was getting out, he said, come on with me. I did one little thing for the Defense Logistic Agency for about 5 months, right immediately after I got out, but before I came to Tennessee. And that brings me to Tennessee in January of '98.
Okay. Oak Ridge.
Oak Ridge.
And you worked at Oak Ridge for how many years?
16.
Okay. And today, Tim is a big muckety-muck with the Civil War Roundtable here in Knoxville, which kind of brings your life full circle back to that 10-year-old boy who gets into Civil War history.
It really does. Is when I finally retired from the laboratory, I said to myself, okay, well, now what are you going to do, Sparky? And it's kind of like, well, I'm going to pursue all of those things that I never really could pursue before, because at this point in time, now those little kids are grown men. They're graduated from college now, and so my wife and I are really on our own. And so I thought to myself, I've read about the Civil War Roundtable, and I've read about Civil War reenacting, so let me try that out. And I pursued both of them, and I still do both of them up until the point where I became a board member, director of community activities, which is directly relatable to what I did in the Army. And then early this year, I became the president of the Civil War Roundtable.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you love Civil War history as much as Tim,
so Morgan, if I had known, I'd have brought an application with me.
Check out the Knoxville Civil War Roundtable, and maybe you'll see
www.kcwrt.org.
And maybe you'll see Lieutenant Colonel Vane there.
So,
Tim, it was great to meet you
all right, Chris,
and talk to you about your story. And thank you all for listening.